I love shows like this, Jim, when we are able to bring on fellow passionate people that are so passionate about whatever they do in the RPG arena that they put it out there. I'm not going to introduce them yet. I'll let you introduce them, Jim. But for those who know me, maybe this is your first time watching the show. I'm Michael Dismuke. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG and lead writer on Captain's Log, which is the solo RPG for Star Trek Adventures, the adaptation there. Hearing a lot of good things about that so far. Keep it going. I've never played with myself so much. That came out totally wrong. I've never played RPG so much solo. Jim Johnson. Jim Johnson.
I don't want to follow that. Come on. Hey, everybody. I'm Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log right here. Captain's Log solo RPG, both published by Modiphius Entertainment, co-host on this here show with Michael for now anyway. Well, these many years, heading on toward episode 100, happening here pretty soon before you know it. And we're going to be talking all things Star Trek Adventures, and life. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of RPGs as literature too, because that's what my guests really talk a lot about, and I'm super excited about that. So without more ado, I'm super excited to announce the two guests we have on tonight, Brad and Jason from the podcast Dice in Mind, among many other things. So I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And as is tradition on this here show, we also want you to fold into your introduction your favorite Star Trek series and your favorite Star Trek character. Now, normally we would ask for your favorite captain, but you know what? Now that Captain's Log is out and you can play literally any character you want in Star Trek, I think it's appropriate to open up the story a little bit and say, well, who's your favorite Star Trek character? So, Jason, you're below me, so clockwise, why don't you go first?
Hi, guys. Well, thank you so very, very much for having us. This is beyond a thrill. My favorite is without question TNG. I mean, you know, I cut my teeth. I grew up with the movies, but I'm TNG through and through, and Jim knows that. In terms of a character, I actually have more favorite Star Trek characters now than I ever have before, but it still starts and ends for me with Captain Picard. There are others, but it really does. That's the first one that comes to mind almost always.
Very nice. And how about you tell us just a little bit about yourself too?
Not to interrupt, but this has never been a question that he's had to pause about before.
Yeah. I have the good fortune of being Brad's friend, so that's pretty much my claim to fame. And in other areas, he's a luminary, which is great. Geez, what do you want to know? I grew up with Trek. Obviously, Brad and I have the Dice in Mind podcast, which has been an inordinate amount of fun. I'm not sure when this will drop, but I'm pretty sure by the time it does, our 100th episode will have come out, which blows our minds. I'm a scientist and academic by background, and increasingly an active writer, so that's a lot of fun.
Very nice. And he is too modest to say it, but we will also make sure that we flog to death this new book that you've just released called Leadership in Star Trek, Lessons from the Captain's Chair by Jason Kaufman and Aaron Peterson. And I have my copy on order, waiting for it to arrive. So I will look forward to talking to you at length about it when it finally hits. Thanks. So Brad, tell us a little bit about yourself and then your favorite series and favorite character.
Yeah, my favorite color is blue. I love long walks on the beach. No. So Brad Brown, Jason and I started our Dice in Mind podcast back in April. Well, our first episode was April 21. We had spent a number of months planning it out beforehand. I've known Jason since 1992 from our freshman year of college. I originally went to college to be a musician, be a classical musician. Decided that I didn't necessarily want to do that as a job, ended up going into business and in technology, and that's where I've kind of resided for 27 years. And jokes aside, Jason and I only lasted at our freshman college for a year before I moved, but Interestingly enough, my closest group of friends, we were just talking about my wedding as a side thing.
Yeah.
They all came from that one year that I was there. And favorite captain or favorite character, well, favorite show is DS9. We've taught, DS9 hands down. I love the other shows. Favorite character, I'm going to go with 3. I'm going to start with, first of all, Benjamin Sisko, hands down. Favorite captain, favorite character. I would say Martok, ironically, as a Klingon. I loved him. I love his character. And then if I go to TNG, it would probably be Will Riker. I just like how he has kind of that dashing swashbuckler type of vibe coming from him. And I grew up on the movies too.
Much like you, really.
Oh yeah, because that's yeah, everyone would agree too, as I cower. So, but yeah,
I did notice as we started the interview how you got into the chair. I was like, oh, that's so Will Riker.
Yeah,
Hops right over.
Hops right over. But no, thank you both for having us. This is, Jason and I have been listening for quite a while. Jim's been gracious enough to join us on our show. Michael, you're going to join us on our show.
Really excited.
So we're really excited for it. And thank you again for having us.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about the show too? So people maybe who've never heard of Dyson Mind, give us a preview.
Yeah, I think the onus behind it originally was Jason and I had wanted to do something together for a while. We thought about doing some writing, but our academic areas didn't really cross. So, and I think, Jason, you're the one that brought up the idea of a podcast, and this was toward the end of 2020 when we were all sitting at home. And so we spent a number of months talking about what we wanted it to be and what was the vibe. And I'll be honest, I don't think we've ever come out and said it, but we kind of wanted to have like an NPR vibe to the show.
Nice.
And talk about, and originally it was just going to be him and I vamping. And then we had the good fortune of having a couple guests on the show, and it's kind of parlayed itself. And then we had this list. We were both Mac users. We used Notes. We have this little list of the people that we wanted to get connected on. And we started following Twitter, and I'm like, there's that guy who's the project manager for Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah.
And this was like 3rd episode or something. Like at some point,
what a sucker.
Yeah, we've got to get him on. So yeah, so our show is, we meet and talk with folks, whether it's Star Trek or others. We bring in creatives or unique. We had Katie Nicolau, who's a meteorologist and a Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
We've had people from different publishing companies. We've had musicians and composers. We're just very lucky. We go out and we try to find people that interest each of us, and we think might interest others. Jason.
We don't know why, and this goes for you too, Jim. We don't know why, honestly, anyone is willing to talk to us. And I'm not making a joke. Brad and I talk about this almost every time we record an interview. We never thought we were going to move into an interview format, and it's like 99% interview. And honestly, it's purely selfish, guys. Like we reach out and try to talk to the people we really would love to talk to and learn from wherever they want to go, right? It's never fan service. It's just, we just want to know, like hear about it, tell us your stories. And people have been ridiculously gracious, and we're hoping that along the way, others are also interested in these people, in these experiences and the ideas. It's just, it's kind of a labor of love, I think, for both of us. And it's just a pure joy.
Yeah, and we've been very lucky, like Jason said. And I think what we've learned, again, it's very self-serving, what we've learned, meeting both of you and meeting all these other people, is this is such a phenomenally inclusive community. And for the most part, friendly, caring towards others.
Oh yeah.
Which is what we had hoped. We didn't expect how inclusive, and I mean that in so many different ways, it was. And one of the things we'll talk about at some point is Jason and I are both voracious readers, him probably more than me. And the idea, I think I talked to him about it a while back, where I'm like, I used to buy RPG books just to read them. I started buying the Star Trek Adventure stuff to read it because I didn't have
Yep.
anyone to game it with me.
Yeah.
So I would sit and read those. So this idea of RPG as lit has been permeating with us throughout the whole process. Sorry, I'm talking too much and then I'll be quiet.
No,
But I just
then
wanted to bring that up because Jim had such a
Yep.
poker face when we were talking about this because you knew about Captain's
Oh my
Log
God. I don't know
and,
how.
and couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
And we were just expounding this idea of writing and RPG is lit, and he didn't even
Jim's like, yeah, that's a good
smile.
idea.
You were building
Yeah.
his confidence up. You were
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
his confidence.
But it was also off air one of those times with you, Jim, that we had mentioned like RPG is lit, and we thought it was a really like dumb idea. Like, we're just into this, but obviously it's ridiculous. And you're like, no, that's a thing. And there's an interest, there's an audience. And I remember we hung up with you and we were like, okay, I don't remember the last time, to be honest. I mean, I'm 49. I don't remember the last time I've sought validation. I don't remember that. But we both felt so validated, like, oh, this is legit. Maybe we should actually try to talk to people about this. And then of course you guys came out with this. And it's like, oh my God, it's like you wrote it to us and all the others who just want to read and play and read and play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I think that was I mean, for me, it was hard to keep that straight face, knowing that we were talking exactly what we were working on at the time, and it worked out great. So I love the fact that I don't know why you keep having me come back, but I will say that you guys are some of the best interviewers out there.
Thank you.
Podcasts. You ask great questions. You're very thoughtful. Both of you are very thoughtful in what you do, and you make it easy to talk to. Right? You're so conversational. And it's like you've just invited me or your other guests into your house, and we're just kicking around the couch and the dinner table or whatever with the
Sweet.
couple of tea or drinks or whatever, and we're just chatting, and that makes it so accessible, right? Like, it's so easy to pull up one of your shows when I'm working on my day job or I'm working on the show or something. I'll just put some of your stuff on in the background and just learn whoever you're talking to. There's always something cool to learn. And I have to admit, though, that interview you did with the meteorologist was probably my favorite. She had some great stories.
Katie's great.
Great stories. Yeah, Katie was amazing. And the other ones that you've done too. I mean, I try to listen to everything when I can, but
Really appreciate it.
I hope you keep. I mean, it's funny that you're almost up to 100, and we're almost up to 100. That's just kind of a weird commonality between the two shows.
Yeah, this is episode 102 for us by the time it airs.
Yes.
We just recorded 104 out of sequence, and we have to backfill 02 and 03.
That's what we're doing. We're actually out of sequence here too. That's so funny.
That's great.
Oh, what a small world.
I guess we started at the same time during the pandemic because
That makes sense.
for those we talk about it, but Jim and we had started on something called STA Engage with Jeff Harvey, who's our producer. He edits our show. Jeff had some scheduling conflicts, and so Jim and I picked up at the release of the Game Master's Guide, and we said we don't know how long this is going to last, and now here we are. So I think the universe was ripe for creatives in this space. I talk about it a lot with Jim, and I'll talk during my gratitude segment at the end that we do our gratitude segment about all the people who've kind of been birthed from the pandemic and now have these amazing niche podcasts that because of hard work and dedication are picking up a following. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens with dedication. So I'm really happy that, I've been following you all. I can't remember the first time I heard an episode. It probably was Jim Johnson's actually very first episode I've listened to when he was on. So what you said, that was number 3?
No.
30. I think it was like 30.
30.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
30.
we were well in.
It honestly took a little while for us, for me especially, to gather up the courage to message and say, hey, would you be willing to come on a podcast that maybe 3 people listen to?
Oh, we talked about it for months beforehand.
Yeah. And I was on the pre-order for when the original core rulebook came out for STA.
Mm-hmm.
So I have Jason and I have talked about. I don't know why you're laughing. I know why.
Guys, because you could have just stopped when you said I'm on the pre-order list. That could have been the entire discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Make fun. Poke a guy while he's down. But I do. And what's interesting, and it'll probably, Michael, happen with you too. When we record with Jim, there's usually a good half an hour before and
Oh,
X amount of time after.
I tell my wife I'm coming to bed late.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
I don't waste material on the ground like film. I just hit record because I get mad when I'm talking to Jim. And so that's why we learned to call it, we literally continue the conversation. We get on,
Yes.
I hit record because I've missed too much gold when I haven't hit record right away.
Yeah,
We've only time we've missed gold is when Jason actually deleted an episode, but
fortunately not one of Jim's.
no.
Great
I'm
episode
just, I'm
too.
just never gonna. You're never gonna live that down.
And well deserved.
You guys are too much. Anyway, so let's talk about Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've had so many great guests on your show, and like the commonality, of course, is Star Trek, right? Because we're just expanding the family, and we're expanding. We're getting to touch all these different people, and by interviewing them, like us interviewing people and you two interviewing people, we're just collectively giving fans more insights, right? It's like I remember way back in the day when the Next Generation Technical Manual came out, right? When Akudo and Sturbach did that thing. The thing I loved, I mean, first I was a techno geek, so I loved all the technical details that they put into that, especially because I was playing a role-playing game at the time, and my entire group were like, "Oh, this is like the Bible. This is like Mecca. This is like the book to use for our role-playing." But I discovered what I liked more were all the footnotes, were all the little inside bits and tips and tricks and like all the insider information that was folded in there. I was like, oh, this is what I want. I want to hear the stories behind the scenes, right? About all these, about the technology and the characters and the people involved in making it. And that's what excited me. And then over the years, as technology got better and we got to interview more people, we had to read more interviews and more books came out about the behind the scenes stuff. I was like, oh, this is really cool because now we're getting to see the personalities behind the screen that are making the show, the writers, the producers, the directors, the art people, all that stuff. And like we're getting to do that now, like our show and your show. You're interviewing these people who are either super fans who have a Star Trek story to tell, or they're actually people on the production in some format or another that have their own stories to tell. And as a lifelong Star Trek fan, this is awesome for me because it's like, oh, I get to learn all these new stories about this the whole franchise, and it adds so much more texture to it that I really appreciate that. So I was just wondering, I'm finally getting to my question, like what keeps you going? Like you're doing 100+ episodes now. Like what keeps you going? Why do you keep doing it?
Those are two separate questions.
Yeah.
Caffeine for the no.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you stay up like you stay up. I will hang up with you, and you're like, I'm gonna go like play something or watch something for the next 3 hours. I'm like, my bedtime was an hour and a half ago. That's entirely true. How do we keep going? I think we learned the hard way, and Brad and I have joked about this. Like when we started the podcast, we thought, okay, we'll just do it for a while, once a month, and see what happens. Because it actually came out of a desire. We just wanted to play, and we weren't. And we thought maybe this will get us closer. And then, as things were picking up, and we discovered people were willing to talk with us, it was like we could do this every week, and that was tenable. I mean, my God, I mean, like Michael, you wrangling all of this, you must go nuts sometimes with this, especially with the production quality on this. It got to be too much. I mean that.
I laugh. I'm sorry. I keep going. No, we'll talk. I'll give it to you.
No, I want to hear that. Yeah. But it just Brad, like we probably ran for the better part of a year. Well, no, more than that. Year and a half. And at some point, between our schedules, we both have families, and between that and work, and we were always making time for this. We were just really struggling to keep up. And then it was like we got to a point and we realized we're not playing at all. And we really wanted to play STA, honestly, which is what helped to convince us, like, we have these books, we talk to you, we have these ideas, and we're not doing it, and we're kind of burning out, so we backed off the every other week. Sorry, you asked a long question, so I can give you a long answer. And so it took a while. It really took a while to find our footing, and then we kept going nuts with interviews. So we were only dropping an episode. So I only had to produce every other week, but people kept saying yes, and we would think, okay, obviously, like, people are going to say no. And so, I mean, what, Brad? We were at one point, we were like easily 5 or 6 interviews in the hopper recorded. And like, I'm a pretty laid back guy, I think, but I was like, this last summer, I was like, okay, we have to finish these episodes. This is really starting to bother me. Like, I'm going away for a week or two, and we have 4 interviews, and they're just sitting there. So, I mean, we
Jason, you're
found
not
our
alone.
footing. Okay, good.
We're
Good.
recording this on August 28th, and just so you know, we're recording this on August 28th. We
Yep.
have scheduling all the way out to January 26th.
We're only through October 30.
Yeah,
We're coming in. Yeah.
and I
Oh,
want
man.
to, and again, talking about the community, and then myself and Jim. By now, it would have been 2 weeks since we aired our live stream of by the time this airs, it would have been over a month and a half when we aired our live stream of our 100th episode. But Jim and I, it's like we have this, what do you call it? Something, embarrassment of riches, where
right.
we're like, oh, we have so many people who are willing to come on, and in 2 hours we can't fit them all, and it's a good problem to have, I guess. But again, the fact that we have this community of Star Trek people who's rooting everyone to be successful is just a nice thing.
It's humbling to be transparent. It is. I mean, again, Brad and I, we've talked about this a lot. It is nothing short of humbling that some of these people will waste their time. I mean, they don't know us, right? The ones who are diligent, they'll check out an episode or two, which is really lovely, and they'll just talk, and and it's just, I mean, these are busy, super creative people, which we are not, right? Busy maybe, super creative no, and they'll just talk, and they'll talk about whatever, and it's just, yeah, it blows the mind. It is a very good problem to have, but we're learning. Like, we've learned. Like, I've stopped myself from reaching out to at least 3 people in the past 2 weeks, and I almost texted you a couple times, Brad, like, okay, never mind, and then I delete the text because it's just not healthy.
And Jason, I mean, Jason, his brother, are like my brothers, and so we talk multiple times per day, even beyond the podcast.
Yeah, we're talking all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's the podcast in many ways is our conversations that we would have on the phone or on FaceTime. We've been lucky. Like we talked about Katie before. We've had Dr. Erin McDonald on. I mean, I could go down the list of people.
So cool. You guys did too.
Yeah. She was, I mean, and I can say this, she's the one who came to us and said at the end, because we both have daughters who are looking at STEM careers. And she goes, if they ever want to talk to someone, let me know. I'll talk with them.
I mean, it was literally like, here's my number. Wow. Let them know. I mean, that's right. But that's Star Trek, to your point before, Mike. Like, that's Star Trek. And I will say, I think we've, to our surprise, consistently, we have encountered that with 100 some episodes. We have encountered that with better than 95%. Well, yeah, almost 99% of everyone we've talked to in RPG land or adjacent, no matter how far you go out, in and out of Star Trek, they've been like that. But when it comes to Star Trek, I mean, 100%.
Yeah,
like, everybody gets it.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
For those who don't know, in case it's the first time and you all have mentioned it right now, talk to me about RPG as literature. Say someone just stumbled onto this podcast and they heard you use that term. What are you talking about?
Yep.
There's multiple facets to it too, because it's something as simple as, like I said, I'm treating the materials that come out, the books. I look at that. We talked about this. I think, Jim, we may have talked about this in a previous episode. The quality of the book, the quality of the paper, what it looks like inside, reading it as a book, or when companies come out with these products that teach you how to write through a playing of a game, hint, hint, all of a sudden now, those of us who aren't writers, I'm not, I come from a technical career. I can write technical documents. I can write business proposals. I haven't been a creative writer probably since I was 10. And now I have a book that lets me help me and guide me to creatively write fan fiction. And so that's another part of RPG as literature, or in effect treating RPG as an engine to generate Jason, I don't know if I where I
Oh,
might
I
have.
think you nailed it. I mean, that's exactly it. Just everything you said. Yeah.
And I've talked about this with other games. I mean, I've said I would love to see at some point, even other Modiphius games and all, I pick up on this idea of doing this. I think, we even talked in X, formerly known as Twitter chat, about other companies that have solo type engines. They're great product. They teach you how to take the multiplayer rules and kind of slim them down to play. Your writing is in effect. What no one really says is your writing. Now you have a book, and ironically, since I know my wife doesn't listen to anything Star Trek, I can say honestly that I actually bought 2 copies of the technical manual. The DS9 copy is perfectly, or of the Captain's Log. One copy is put away on my shelf. I'm using the TNG copy because the DS9 copy must remain unfettered. But I mean, I can't do this right now with other products. I don't have a guide for it.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who isn't a fiction writer, I now have a guide to write in a universe that I grew up. I'm old enough that I went and saw motion picture when it came out. I was really young, and I wasn't allowed to go see Khan because Spock died, and they thought that would be traumatic for me. So now I can write in those worlds. And that, to me, we didn't want to sound too patronizing when Jim, you dropped it on us, but I mean, we were both.
Oh my God. We talked about nothing else.
Nothing else.
Michael, hats off, because I mean, this thing is a work of art.
Oh, thank you. Well, let's talk more about that, because I again, when Jim and Jason, I want to hear your takes on Star Trek as literature, because I know I've been watching with great enthusiasm the reaction happening online. And I love art. I love art. I love science. I love art. I love STEAM. So I'm curious with Jason and Jim, again, when you think of RPG as literature, what is opening up? Like, where do you think this is going to open up going forward?
I mean, God, Michael, I don't think I have a good answer for that. I don't know what it's going to open up. I think, to what Brad said, I would like to see more of this type of thing, like, to echo what you said, Brett, like with Captain's Log being an example of this is how to do it, not just like, oh, here's a novel idea, because this certainly leapfrogs what's out there, but like, and by the way, how to do it really, really well. It would be fascinating. It would be fascinating to see something like Captain's Log in other IPs. Like, I mean, I would love to see something like this. Are we allowed to say Star Wars here? I would love to see something like that here, but I would also, like, selfishly love to see like more of this derivations that would further help us explore through writing more of Star Trek, right? I mean, I think really serious, like, hats off in terms of the scope of Trek in the book. Like, I mean, we've talked about this with you, Jim, in interviews both on and offline, in terms of how with STA and what you're all producing, truly every book has been an iteration, and the scope has grown, like the reach into and beyond canon has grown. There's so much more to play with. I think, though, so like I can pick up something like Captain's Log or some of the others, and it's like, if I want to dream in Star Trek, these are now primary resources for me. And like back in the day, I wish they still came out, but like as a kid / adolescent / young adult / until they stop publishing them, I mean, I would get the encyclopedias, right? I would get the Planets of the UFP. I would get the computer one, which is hilarious and dated and lovely. I have the star charts, all of that, because I wanted to immerse myself. But at this point in life, I don't want to just consume, I want to create. And so I think that's where the literature piece comes in, right, for me. And I say that really naively, because I'm whatever. I don't write fiction per se, but like Brad and I are writing a little bit of fanfic now, courtesy of Captain's Log. And it's a way for us to get in there. Like when this came out, it was like, we looked at each other, and it's like, when Jim sent us PDF, and it's like, we can do it now. Like, we know what we want to do. We've known what we wanted to do for 2 years. We didn't have the skill set, and this allowed us to start to learn it. So to me, that's the lit.
And if I could say, testament to you, Mike, and all that, because the material is also very accessible.
It's the team. I want to say I
okay.
was only the lead
to
writer.
both of you, and everyone.
I don't. Yeah, I want to be clear. There's like 10 writers on this and 5 rule designers. So I want to make sure you understand. I just was wrangling and doing Jim's job, which I don't think I could ever do again. Honestly, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But I just want to keep saying that there was a lot of confabs with the front page of the book. Look at all those names in there: Josh Allen, Allison Sive, Al Spader, Aaron Paul. Yeah, there's a lot of. So yeah, all I did was point, but people did the work.
And we've talked to some of them, and we're scheduled to talk to more. So like they're awesome. I mean, you guys have an amazing team. I think you're still being too humble because lead writer is. Come on, but you guys have an amazing team. You have an amazing set of writers on STA, and and they're all just really nice people. That or we just haven't met the duds yet, but they seem.
We
to
only
be
work with nice people. That's Jim. Jim doesn't have many requirements, but he does demand nice. Jim, Star Trek RPG is literature. I'm trying to. This is a new term for me. Like, I'm trying to wrap my head what that means, because I'm big into like making sure children learn to be creative. And so like I when we were working on this, I was like, man, could a teacher use this in class to teach writing? Jim, what's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I think and I know that Jason and Brad and I have talked to this a little bit on some of the shows that we've done, but like back in the day, 80s, when D&D first came out, and then you had Star Frontiers and you had some other games that were coming out, they were more technical manuals than they were like actual like storytelling games, right? There was a lot of information in there about mechanically how to play the game, how to run the game, how to create a character, how to do encounters, how to do all that stuff, and there was just enough like setting and world building and stuff in there that a game master and a player could go from there. And of course, there was a steady stream of modules and stuff coming out that you could kind of fill in the blanks and then just kind of make it work for yourself. But over time, like as more RPG companies came out and more products came out and more game lines came out, I think especially like White Wolf, when Vampire came out, and Werewolf, and some of their games, there was much more of a storytelling slant to those, and you can see it in the books, right? Like most of their books started with a big chunk of fiction that was written in their setting, in their milieu. So you kind of got a feel for like, how does a vampire story work? Like, how does it? What's the feel? What's the vibe that you're trying to get from it? And you could use that as a influence into the game that you wanted to tell, whether it was vampire, werewolf, or mage, or whatever it was. And that, me kind of being a novice storyteller at the time, and a writer and a gamer, I was like, oh, you can do more with RPGs than just slash and hack and slash and bash and grab XP and gold. Not that there's anything wrong with that by any means. Like, I've gotten plenty of years of joy out of playing the D&D mode in games, but by and large, my D&D campaigns have never been super storytelling. I mean, until later in life, when I really like 4th edition because it really unlocked my creativity in ways that some of the other D&D editions didn't, but that's beside the point. But so there's that, right? So it's like, I've seen the RPG industry kind of move a little bit more toward storytelling, and the books being more, not just technical manuals, but also getting a lot more world building and storytelling stuff into it, right? And then now with as technology advanced and as publishing advanced and things got better and easier and cheaper to do, you started seeing like premium products come out with like beautiful covers and beautiful paper and bookmarks, and just like the overall production value of books went up. And so now they're not just reference books or technical manuals, they're actually, I don't want to say heirloom, but like there are some pricey RPG books out there, and you get them and you're very careful with them not to split the covers or whatever, and they are precious objects in and of themselves, in addition to being a game. And what I really appreciate is like some of those things are available on PDF now, so you can get the PDF and tear that apart and use that as your reference tool, and you just safely put that book on the shelf and just leave it alone. In fact, two good examples I'll give you is the Pendragon, the Great Pendragon campaign that Greg Stafford wrote. It's like 400 pages. It's a beautiful tome of Arthurian legend from the beginning to the end. and there's like, you know, years and years and years of gaming potential in that, and I love it because there's just so much literature in it and just so much, you know, historical material. And then the other one is the most recent edition of the One Ring RPG that Free League came out with the red cover and the gold trim. I mean, it's just a beautiful book, and I don't want to open it because it's like, oh, it's a beautiful book. It was well written and well designed, and like the production values are absolutely there. And it's like,
don't forget the Dune one. The Dune one knocked me off.
I don't have the Dune one. You'll have
Did
to
you
talk
get
about
it, Michael? Did you get a copy of? Did I read that you got a copy of the really
did,
limited,
yeah.
cool looking version of it?
Mhm.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, so
I was
Michael,
People, my family keeps coming in the house thinking it's a Bible. I'm like, no, this is the Dune RPG book.
Well, that's acceptable.
But anyway, so my long-winded point is that you know, over time, RPG books have become something more than just games, right? Especially with the pandemic now, because a lot of people are not able to get together with friends, either face to face or online to game. I think one of the most common problems that gamers have is finding other gamers to play the games with, at all. So you see that happening. So like sometimes people are collecting RPGs just for the sake of reading them and enjoying them, and I think certain RPG designers and companies have realized that and have started morphing what they put into their RPG books so that it's not just here's how to create a character, here's how to create a scenario, here's how to play the game. It's actually more world building, more character, more fluff, as you call it, so that it's a more balanced book, and you're like, oh yeah, I could just read this and enjoy the read and then put it on my shelf and, you know, go on to something else. So I think it's just an evolution of the hobby to some extent. But in specific to, like, you know, solo RPGs, I think solo RPGs are really, really more oriented toward playing games alone. And I mean, every single one I've picked up is a journaling game to some degree. I think I've heard some people knock Captain's Log because it's a journaling game. It's like, well, of course it's a journaling game. It's a solo RPG. What else would it be? Like, you know, all the other ones that I've played, like, you know, Ironstorm, Starforged, and not 5 Leagues, 5 Parsecs. And then there's a few other ones. It's like, these are all journaling games. They like, you have to play the game, and you're playing the game, and as you're playing the game, you're writing down the stuff that happens. So I'd like, that might just be me and missing
No, it's not just you, because remember the other day we were all stunned because someone had actually asked, am I supposed to play this solo RPG by myself? And
yeah,
literally the whole social media feed stopped for probably a good 20 minutes as everyone reread the question and make sure we were not making assumptions.
you could hear the record scratch, right? Like,
but you know what's funny is that Jason and I use this. We duet it, but we're using the solo RPG rules because we're writing.
This is Jim and idea.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
writing our
nice.
story together.
Mhm.
So, you know, and I've watched the feed out in Reddit and all that, and people talking very positively about it. It's not even, it goes beyond. It's almost like a creative writing resource manual if you want to write in the Trek world.
Toward that end, if you all do want to put out a dedicated Captain's Log journal to aid in the process, neither of us would be opposed, and we'd be happy to pre-order.
You mean like a blank book?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
with like cheats in it or something?
Yeah. I think that'd be pretty.
I think we've
Brad,
talked about this.
You got something like that for the Dune game, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I picked up a couple of the Dune journals,
Yeah.
and I've been a Dune collector because I'm a Dune fan. But
Oh.
but I mean, I have a blurred,
You're
but I
fussy.
have these
yeah.
and I use these as I have one dedicated to Captain's Log, and I
Mhm.
even went so far as to buy a set of Kirk's Tunics dice.
Oh, yeah.
Smart move. You got to have these, man. These are
Yeah.
like gold.
Those are my dedicated Captain's Log dice.
Nice.
So
I've got
they-
my science blue.
Yeah,
I have a question for you all too, because I know we actually want to talk about you more than talking about our product. There's actually a question I have, because we're looking through the podcast and listening to the podcast. You both are doing a great job, not just talking about, oh, here's the game, here's the storyline of the game, but you're actually getting it with a lot of the game designers. So I kind of want to get in your head about that space, what you see happening out there, what some of your favorite moments with game designers have been, stories that stand out. Talk to us about the game design element, the crunchy stuff.
I'm going to talk about one, Jason, and because
Okay.
one of the
Yeah,
first
I'm
games
curious.
that we started kind of playing and goofing around with before the podcast even became a thought in our head was Pathfinder. And Jason had been playing in the Star Wars world. playing
That's
Edge of the
that's all
Empire.
I knew at the time, up until a few
So
years ago.
I picked up the Genesis material and I'm like, oh, this is a sandbox. You know, Jace, what we should do is we should write a Star Trek game using this
I was
Genesis.
thinking about this evening.
And we talked about this. I think we were dumb enough to mention it to Jim in one of the first podcasts.
Off air. I was thinking, God, most people would have been like, sit down, let me tell you something. And we're like, we love the game. We're totally into Star Trek. This whole 2D20 thing, hard pass. We're just gonna write our own mechanic with the Genesis dice. And Jim, so few people would have done this. You were like, okay, that's fair, but maybe give it a chance. And you would like chip at that. Like when we talked to you, it was just the gentlest of nudges, right? And then we finally sat down to play it. We're like, okay, we seriously have to like just sit down and play this game. We have to make the time. And we got into it. It's like, oh my God, this is such a good mechanic.
And oh boy, were we so stupid.
I think we both
I did the
like,
same.
messaged
I
you.
did the
okay,
same.
good,
Yeah.
good.
Not
Beautiful.
stupid. No, not
But
stupid.
Yeah,
but
pretty stupid.
just this goes back to what we said before is in talking with folks like, Thomas Maroney, James Sutter, all of these folks who have
before like Thomas became the most popular person in Star Trek.
yeah,
Like, right before, thank God.
because I'm a player of Star Trek Online, and so when I got to see him, I was like, ooh. But we again are talking to people that I always verse it to Jason. I'm like, these are normally people that I would not be able to strike up a conversation with. I wouldn't know how to. Hey, tell me about. I guess I could, but we always had thought the podcast was a vehicle for us to actually bring a little bit of legitimacy to a self-serving need to want to talk to all these people that create.
But you found the key to good relationships, though. Remember, the key to good relationships is getting the other person to talk about themselves. So you're, again, Jim, commending your interviewing skills. That's the thing. And honestly, what's weird is I'm an introvert. I get and me and Jim have talked about this. I get really bad stage fright, though I do it. My job puts me in front of people on stage all the time. But the reason I like this format, because I'm able to just it feels personal, like we're around the dinner table and I can just keep plowing you guys with questions. So that's, I think, Jason and Brad, that's, I think, what make you good interviewers is you actually sit there and just are curious about the person and it draws out the best in them.
I have found, not to be immodest, but through experience, one, being clinically trained definitely helps. Two, being married for a long time definitely helps. I know how to listen.
Exactly.
I don't know if she'd agree with that, but
Probably not, but
never enough.
No, never
But,
enough. That's nailed it. Yeah, never enough.
we have, I think by the time this comes out, our 100th episode is out. We have Drew Nichols on, who was associate producer and
he
editor
was the
for Star
editor.
Trek for Star Trek Picard.
Very nice.
For season 3, including where was it,
Wow.
Eps 9 and 10, and
yeah.
it just.
And
it
he
really-
was,
yeah.
and he
Oh
came
my
up. He
God.
goes, "I don't know why you'd want to talk to me. What do you want to talk about?" And I'm like, "Well, obviously we want to talk about Star Trek, but
Yeah.
I mean, he was involved in working with Terry Matalas before Picard, before Star Trek.
Yeah.
He was involved in 12 Monkeys and all this other
Got a
stuff."
fascinating story.
And he's like, "Well, how do you want to do it?" And I'm like, "Think of it, Jim. You said this before. Think of it as we're just going to sit down, have your coffee or whatever your beverage of choice
Yeah.
is,
Mhm,
and let's just chat."
mhm.
I'm not, I'm an introverted guy. A lot of times my chattiness is a defense mechanism. But sitting down and talking to people like that, and I don't want to, by not naming someone off, I don't want to minimize them, but like having Nami Nalumad, who was the composer for Star Trek Prodigy and Star Trek Strange New World.
She actually, when we interviewed her, she took
was
a
like-
sip of coffee, and it was kind of on purpose, and it kind of wasn't. It was very sweet at the. She was just so sweet, and she takes a sip of coffee, and it's like the Strange New Worlds mug, which did not exist beyond the production crew.
Wow.
And so you were so good, Brad. After we stopped the recording, Brad's like, "So the mug," and she's like, "Yeah."
So just
So cool.
talking to these people.
Well, if I made a case in point, just because again we're biased. We've talked people like you guys. People have been so genuine and so kind and such seemingly good people and interesting people. Laurie Ulster, with TrekMovie.com, right? She came on some time ago now, and then she's just a deeply good person. I'm biased because she helped me with some networking, and in that world, and in their bits of the week at the end of one of their all access podcast, which is like, for me, that's every Friday listening, because they do the best roundup of what's going on, like canon wise, and like what, the production and all that is fascinating. And her bit of the week was, she mentioned that she had spoken with us on the podcast, and what surprised her was we never really asked about Star Trek. We just talked about her. And it's like, well, yeah, so we were thrilled like that our guests are picking up on that, but that's why we want to talk to people, because they're interesting and and we learn something every single time.
Every single time.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. So let's steer the conversation back just a little bit toward game mechanics. And and you actually got to where I was actually texting Michael and said, I have a follow-up question for them on your question, but you actually got to it before I did, and that's when I first met you guys, when we did that first episode. I remember you guys were working really hard, kind of like on your own time, to develop some sort of rule system for the game that you wanted to play. And I remember having watched some of your earlier episodes. You're like, oh yeah, Star Trek Adventures 2D20, yeah, whatever. We don't really like the system. We're going to make our own system because you're creative and that's what you want to do. And I was like, okay. I mean, clearly you hadn't tried it yet. You hadn't played it yet, which is okay. But like, did you read the quick start? Did you try it? But what I was really curious about, though, is like, you have had conversations with so many game designers, game developers, mechanics, etc. Like what are you seeing happening with mechanics in general with RPGs? And so let's stop there. I'll just go with that question. Like, what are you seeing in terms of mechanics that excites you to want to play?
I think you hit it when you talked about this idea of how games are becoming more narrative.
Mm-hmm.
You think of like Fate or Savage Worlds or some of these games that are really story driven. And I think what Jason and I in our own different ways are analytical. Jason does a lot of research, works with numbers and things. I work in analytics. So numbers and dice mechanics were one of the things we wanted to talk about. But it much like the podcast, the story morphed when we realized there was so much more than just rolling a die or rolling dice. You see this coming out. I have Forbidden Lands, as for example. It's through Modiphius, is via Modiphius, part of their website. Just that and these other games, the dice are there to kind of help reinforce decisions. And you can see that when you watch live plays. I think the live plays now versus what you saw a couple of years ago, where it was a lot of dice rolling, and a lot of like kind of choose your own adventure, analytical. Now you watch these, and this almost goes to like visual lit. You watch these Twitch streams or whatever, and these people are telling stories that are compelling, and you can sit and watch those Twitch streams, even with them up on the screen, like we are all up here on ours, and watch a really cool story. And I think that's maybe more broad than maybe you were talking about, Jim, but originally we were really focused on like sticking with 2 or 3 dice mechanics, which is why we kind of were focusing on Genesis. Once we realized that's kind of silly to do, and we started playing 2D20, I've said that's probably my favorite mechanic, that 1A, and along with Genesis 1B, just because they both help drive a narrative type of game. And it's not so much A-B anymore. Do you hit, do you not? It's much more, it helps reinforce, it helps kind of guide the story versus the dice telling the story. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't actually like the 2D20. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh God, here we go, God.
You have so few chances.
For the record, it was Jason that didn't like it. I did.
Right. That's weird. They lost the episode. I mean, I think So I'll go more mechanical than that because I agree with everything you said, Brad. Because I mean, we like obviously from our podcast, we geek out about world building, and we kind of geek out about everything. But world building and dice mechanics, those were the things that got us into doing this. And at least on my part, it was pure ignorance. It was I could sit down with the Genesis narrative dice instructions and roll a few times. Even just read it. It's like, okay, I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't know what the deal is with all the symbols, but once you learn them, it's slick. I could sit down with a D20 mechanic, right? Like from 5e. And I mean, once I figured out how mods worked, it's like, oh, this is super simple. Like this is, okay, sure, great. You got your bell curve and blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't understand, like reading about the D20 system, it's like, why are you making me roll a second die? It looks just like the first. It's lovely. It's the right color blue, but why do I have to do that? And the very first time we rolled, Brad, we grabbed, sorry, I'm a little tired. I'm blocking on it. We played, what was it? Among the Stars? We played the
starter kit,
right? And we had time. We literally had an hour. We gave up recording time. We sat down. I think I GM'd the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Okay. We did that, finished the hour, and it was like, holy crap, this mechanic works. It takes the conceptual simplicity of the D20, but then it wipes away the major variants, right? It takes the swings out. It allows you to be crunchy but still work with the narrative. And like what's the complication? I mean, why are they making me do all these things? And then it was like, oh yeah, I totally get it now. This works so fluidly, and I think so mechanistically, we started falling for 2D20 literally the first time we played and became converts because it accomplishes all the goals, right? We really want to get Nathan Dowdell. We just haven't had the guts to actually ask him because this has been out for so long. But
you sound to me, Jason.
Man.
You sound to me like you read that book Against the Gods, The History of Risk, or the remarkable story of Risk. Peter Bernstein. Have you read that?
I know of the book. I've never read it. Oh my goodness! Maybe I should.
It's one of the most amazing. It sounds boring. It's about probability mathematics.
Yeah.
And risk aversion, but how you apply it to business. But the way you just described that mathematically, I was like, ooh, that sounds so Peter Bernstein.
We actually had an episode early on where we talked about different dice mechanics and played out real life circumstances.
That was fun. Stupid, but fun.
And yes, completely stupid. I mean, we could wipe that episode away. We probably should, but we used the different dice to walk through decision making. And it was funny how we played out as like mini GM, but like real life. We played out and 2D20 and Genesis were the two that I found the most kind of realistic when you tell the story.
Well, the thing is with this is interesting where we're about to go real quick, because I believe that you make 100 decisions, just make 100 decisions, and the one that turns out right is going to pay off, right? Of course, the one that turns out wrong could kill you. But people are so risk averse now for the littlest things that actually, why? It's like, even if this blows up, you're not going to end up in HR and you're not going to end up costing the company money. So just make the damn decision and we'll worry about it later. And so I love that with the dice mechanics, and you all playing a real life scenario with that, like walking around one day and just doing dice as you go through life would be great. Great practice.
It was an episode of Big Bang Theory. Sheldon did that where he took a D20 and he rolled it, and he ended up having a side of coleslaw and a buttermilk for dinner or something like that, because that's all he rolled. That's what kind of precipitated us doing it, just to see how the mechanics would play out and how, it wasn't such a coin flip.
Right.
That's cool to hear that, because there are some, again, I'm going to ask you, going back to game mechanics, do you find that there are systems that are designed nowadays that, and you don't have to name names, but that are just like unnecessary dice rolling to get to the point?
Yeah. Oh, sure. And originally I originally dragged Jason into gaming. You were doing other games. I originally dragged him into us doing some games together because we thought we wanted crunchy.
You thought you wanted super crunchy, and it was the only way I could get you to play, so I did it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And it was totally worth it.
Revisionist history. But I thought because of my later in midlife found interest in numbers and probability and all that. Like I said, I was a musician. I can read music. I can do that. Numbers and all that were something I didn't want to touch. As my career changed, I saw that and I wanted crunchy. There are games out there that are phenomenal games, way too crunchy, and people like playing them. More power to them. I have a shelf over here of crunchy games. Some of which we tried early on, and what we found is we didn't enjoy and we didn't get into the games as well if they were super crunchy, just because there's a bigger learning curve. The learning curve with Star Trek, even the learning curve, I'll be honest with you, Jason had to go through it multiple times with me, Star Wars, because of the probabilities and how the Genesis dice, how the narrative dice system works. But crunchiness wise, I'm looking like one of them that we've talked about multiple times is Traveler. I mean, Traveler is a game where you could actually die during character creation if you play those rules.
Wow.
So
I'm curious, and yeah, we talk about Star Trek Adventures a lot here, but I'm curious if you were to recommend, both of you, if you were to recommend a game that has the same kind of I like the mechanics for Star Trek Adventures. I was like you. I came out of all the different Marvel iterations before, and so I didn't mind a lot of dice, 2, 4, 4, 6, 8, all that. But then I was skeptical, ended up liking Star Trek Adventures. If it wasn't a Star Trek Adventures game, what would you recommend has a similarly enjoyable gaming mechanic?
Take this with a grain of salt. I'm focusing on the similarly enjoyable, not an entirely equivalent mechanic.
It's hard, yeah.
It is. I do think they are. I think they're approximately equivalent in terms of outcome. How they get there is very different. I love the 2D20, obviously, and I really do love the Genesis narrative system. If you look at if you look at the math behind the system, right? If you I mean, it's 2023, at least for a little while more. It's all on the interwebs, and so people have done these wonderful analyses of creating these probability graphs of here's how here's what you get when you roll this, and if you spend a little bit of time, I'm not a math wonk at all, but even I can see, okay, here's the tuning for how these dice work. And to me, the outcome is a similar feel to the 2D20, that you have some really cool things happen, but the swings aren't ridiculous. Right, of course, there's some fundamental differences, but the swings are real life, right? Like when I'm playing Star Trek Adventures with the 2D20, it feels like these are potentially real life events. When I'm playing Star Wars with the Genesis dice system, it feels like the real life events. And then in very different ways, they add essentially advantages and disadvantages through different languages and different mechanics, and the outcome seems different. Where that totally breaks down then is, at least for me, is I have to play Star Trek differently than I have to play other things like Star Wars, and especially like fantasy stuff. Star Trek is, I didn't make this up, obviously. Star Trek is a history of the future. Like when I play Star Trek, I'm playing the future I want to see. And it's harder. Brandon, I've talked a lot about this just personally over the past few years. It's harder for me, total transparency, to be as creative in as truly divergently creative in Star Trek, because I have such abiding respect and love for the canon. And it's like, well, I'm just here to play in it, right? I don't want to break it. Whereas anything, but I mean, it's hard. And where with something like D&D or Star Wars, it's like, good luck breaking it. It'll just be another Kyber crystal thing, right? Or midichlorians, or look, there's another god in a pantheon and another, right? You can't do it. So yeah.
I think the other game that we've enjoyed playing, that I like the narrative, that I like the dice system, is Green Ronin's Age system. It's a 3D6 system. It's very simple to learn, and the idea of there's some really cute I don't want to say, well, I'll say cute type of tricks to the dice rolls and all that, that we had been looking for a fantasy game to play that was a little different than the two major players out there. No disrespect to them. And came across the Age system. We can play it. They have the Expanse. We can play in the future. We can play in the past, although Trek seems to have taken up most of our future sci-fi gaming. But high fantasy world, Fantasy Age, I like that mechanic. It's very simple to learn. But I'm anxious to see. I haven't looked at Dreams and Machines yet. That's come out.
That's so weird. I downloaded it today.
Did you? I haven't looked at it yet. It's on my list.
They have the free RPG quick start on Modiphius. So if you go check it out, you can at least read through the.
I love those because it gives you such an ability to play for free. I'm still looking for. I can't mentally handle 65 dice mechanics in my head. Just can't do it. I kind of like to focus. I like the 3D6 system. I like the 2D20 system, and there's one or two others that I'm interested in. But Jason and I already talked about it. I'm not going to be able to look at them until next year. We're engrossed with our Star Trek New Voyages stuff, where we're using Captain's Log to put out these little videos. We're engrossed in that. We're engrossed in a couple other things Trek related. We'll talk about this. Jason has a bit of a writing career outside of what we do,
which we're going to want to talk about. I want to tell people too that listening to Dice in Mind is kind of, for me, touring Gen Con. I just went to my first Gen Con this year. I keep talking about it, but I didn't have enough time to dive in and play as many games as I wanted to. But what I have appreciated about your podcast is I can, to the question I just asked you about the mechanics and the design and stuff like that. That's like touring through Gen Con and getting a taste of all these different games out there that I'll never have time to play. So I appreciate you guys take the time to do that. And
part of it is just I have, my library is a bit overdone, and so I'll say, hey, Jason,
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I found this book. Why don't we, let's talk about Tales from the Loop,
and we know we can be Trek focused, Trek centric on the podcast, and we're good with that. But we actively strive not to become a Star Trek podcast. That would be the next podcast, right? We really want to explore the whole range in the industry because it's absolutely fascinating. And the more we talk to the more people from more perspectives in and around these games and canons, the better we can play in any of them, and the better we can write in any of them. And I think that's just the most fun part.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, Brad, I really appreciate you mentioning Fantasy Age, because for the longest time now, I've been looking for a high fantasy narrative focused system, and I just haven't been finding them. I can kind of take some of the existing ones and kind of nudge them into narrative, even though the system itself fights that, right? And even some of my players, when I bring those games to the table, they're like, "Oh no, combat's happening now. We got the miniatures, we got the tokens, we got the map tiles. It's a tactical minis game now." And it's like, I didn't want a tactical minis game. I want a narrative. And
it's so fast to create characters too. You can get moving. If you ever want to do it, we're all game. Come on board.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
Pun intended.
That should be. Is that your tagline? Trademarked? We're all game, because that's brilliant.
Trust me, Michael. We are not all game. I think that's abundantly clear. But we probably just should not have a tagline.
Make it your tagline. Get yourself a T-shirt.
Which, by the way, do you have to tag it? Do you have to tag it explicit? Because Jason said crap earlier. Well, now that you might have to, because
no, we're still on PG-13. As long as my nieces and nephews can tune in. And
I mean, jokes aside, we really go out of our way to make it like that on Dice and Mind. I mean, we would never shut down a guest. We've had a few guests, not just Jim. We've had a few guests who are like, "I swear a lot. Is that okay?" And it's like, we're here to talk to you. Right. Worst thing is we flag the sucker who. It's not like we have kids listening to the podcast. I mean, yeah.
Our wives don't even listen.
Really?
So. Of course they don't. They never do.
Oh no, they have better judgment.
Yeah.
You'd
I
be
think
surprised though, because oh, go ahead, Jim. What did you say?
I was just gonna say, I think I've kept it pretty clean. I may have dropped one here or there, but I try
You
to keep
have.
You have.
I try to keep it PG-13. Except when
I'm looking at our, because we keep a list and Jason flags them as explicit, and I don't
You
see
keep a
one
list.
where we've had to do that with you.
No,
our,
it's just if someone swears.
See-
It's like just you never know.
I want to know.
Comes on.
Yeah, but I want to know, since we're talking about it, what can we do to get the next generation into RPGs?
Good question.
You're aficionados of the genre based on, from the podcast. I know that myself and Jim, I definitely induct my nieces and nephews. Some like it, some meh about it. But what would your suggestions be with everything going on out there to get kids to start into RPG?
It's an awesome question. I've tried locally, shall we say. So when my daughters, I've got two daughters, they're both young women, they're both teenagers now, just for a little while yet. When they were younger, along with my nephews and niece, I got them all into role playing. Now, of course, it wasn't Star Trek Adventures because it did not yet exist, or it actually probably right around the time they realized this was really dorky and why would we want to do this, Dad? Right? That's right around the time that STA came out. But I would just homebrew it. I do some prep. It was a lot of fun. I gathered them around the table, and it was like always when we were visiting over at my parents' house. So we'd be on the floor, everyone's around. They were all like 10 to 14. And I bring that up because I think, at least in my experience, I think younger is better. And like Brad, you and I have talked to people on the podcast who do this, right? Like literally for a living, and it's amazing what they do. And younger is better. Like I wasn't introduced to role playing until I was, I think I just finished my sophomore year of high school, right? And I mean, I wasn't a hard sell. I was like, I'm in. This is amazing. But I don't think that works for a lot of kids. And I think today there are so many stimuli out there and so many ways to play and so many things to play, and it's all online now. And that's awesome. But right, like we're the first video game generation. And I mean, I spent an inordinate amount of time as a kid in actual arcades. But I think there's something beautiful about pencil and paper RPGs. And when kids are little, I mean, it's theater of the mind. They are naturally excellent at this, and you're just giving them a sandbox to play in. And just from my experience, I think nothing has to be cool. It just has to be fun. And so if we get them like elementary into the very start of middle, so what if they're not lifelong players? They are still better people and more creative thinkers because maybe they spent a few years doing it.
I bought my daughter because she was a huge Stranger Things fan, and Wizards had come out with the original red box, and it had a little Demogorgon in it, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get her to play. She was all excited, and then the box I found on my desk probably 2 years later, and I'm like, were you just excited just so you wouldn't hurt my feelings? And she goes, yeah, I don't want to play. But I appreciated her honesty, and that's what we've taught her. My son, we've looked at, I've been trying to get him more into sci-fi. I couldn't convince him to watch Firefly before The Rookie. I'm like, if you're going to watch a Nathan Fillion show, you got to start with Firefly. For them, you go out and you watch TikTok, of which I do my share. A lot of it is game playing, where they're playing Rust or they're playing, these other instant gratification games.
Most of it's Letterkenny, but go on.
Yeah. You dropped it, but it's
it's probably the same people who decide to use GarageBand to make your music, and then the kid who picks up a guitar and says, I'm feeling like it's the same energy there.
I think it RPG games are a little more slow burn than some of these instant gratification games are. And my hope is that we'll see a difference. I'll add this at the end. I've worked for education companies, adult education companies, and they did a study about training adults. And for those of us that are Gen X or on the Gen X millennial area, we can still take a 30-minute training session without a loss of interest. Millennials, straight up millennials heading towards Gen Z, training sessions should be no longer than 6 minutes.
Yep.
When they got to Gen Z, and I think it's now Gen Alpha, I don't know what they're calling it anymore. Now they're saying 3 minutes or less. And so it's an environment where everyone is looking for quick, instant gratification, 30-second videos. TikTok, which was Musical.ly before it was TikTok, Vine was out there, all of these little quick hit videos. And so teaching patience, teaching longevity, the slow burn. Jason, you're going to jump in here.
And I'm just agreeing with you because, I mean, and I think this is important to say because it's not being said in any circles, really, right? Neurologically, the brain hasn't changed. We have become, well, younger, have become socialized to expect the boom, 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 boom of media,
Correct.
right? Kids these days, now I sound like Brad when we're offline. Kids these days, right? The 6-minute thing, that's an issue because that's what they've been raised on and learned. And so, RPGs, like you said, it's a slow burn. That can teach patience, that can teach theater of the mind, that can teach step by step by step, so that we're not always living moment to moment.
And it's sharing empathy, patience. Right. We talk about that, me and Jim, about just being okay. Like I've sat back, I know Jim has too. We've talked several times where for 30 minutes we let our players go because we're just having so much fun watching them.
And it can work as well for someone who's truly neurodivergent as someone who isn't. And that's hard to find, especially in modern society when things are fast and furious.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, because you were talking about miniatures before, and this is maybe, I don't have the answer. One of the things I've tried to do to get my son, who's 19, a little more involved in gaming is going down the board game path. Axis and Allies, Star Trek Rebellion used to be a video game. They came out with a board game version of it. Firefly, the board game, those type of things, because it's more palatable and visual. Whereas a lot of times you can do gaming with virtual tabletops that are phenomenal, but I'm an analog person. I got my screen blurred, but this is my notebook. This is where I journal Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log.
We purposely did not closely read Captain's Log, purposely, until the print version came out.
Yeah, because we both like the palatable book. My son's in college. We've all been to college. We all have seen our book, the prices we had to pay for books. His books between his first 2 semesters at college were $120. And it was digital versions of the books. They don't get physical books. And he's in an engineering program. Mm-hmm. So this idea of analog books, Jason, I yield to your expertise on this, but you have to hit them young to teach them the need and the love for something that doesn't take 6 to 10 seconds for gratification.
And the precedent just said, I mean, look at the resurgence of vinyl, right? With music. I mean, who saw that coming back? Talk about, compared to streaming, the most inefficient, fragile way possible to enjoy music. And it's become huge. There is, I mean, I think it's all around us, right? People will do this. There is a potential. There is maybe even a need. Just a matter of getting out in front of people.
Well, with music, you could turn on the radio and you can hear auto-tune. And as a former aspiring professional musician, auto-tuned music just drives me crazy. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s music. That was my thing. So, when I play guitar, that's what I gravitate to. I'm starting to hear bands now come back where you're actually hearing people actually sing. You're hearing guitar, you're hearing drums. Mm-hmm. If you like the 80s, you're hearing keyboard. Going back to things that take time, I'm hopeful. I see it with my kids. I'm hopeful that, and this is that they can right in many ways the wrongs that we created as Gen Xers or didn't fix when we could have. And that's the only thing I really worry about with that generation is
see, now we're back to Star Trek.
Well, I think it's about giving them the tools too. And going back to the creative renaissance, I'll call it right now, of RPG happening right now is more people can not only play but then create and memorialize it. And maybe that is the key, is when a kid, after they play, like my nieces and nephews, they play with me, I journal it right after and they go read it and they're like, oh, and then when I didn't journal the last game, they're complaining about it. So
Cool.
so my thing is, well,
That is cool.
take your own dang notes, you know. And so maybe that'll spur them on to get into it.
So I
But
want
that gives me hope.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt. Sorry, Jim. That just gives me hope that the generations upcoming will, that I'll be completely wrong. And I hope I am.
I hope so, because they said TV would kill us, but we're actually more creative, more people being creative. So sorry, Jim, I keep talking over Jim.
The blackboard was going to end education because now students wouldn't have to learn. Dead serious, right? Every generation, man.
Sorry, Jim, I jumped over.
Yeah, now's your
You were
turn.
talking. Yeah.
That's all right. So I wanted to, we're going to go back a little bit because I couldn't get a word in, because this is all great conversation, but I want to pick at something a little bit that you were talking about how it would be nice to get the newer generation to be a little more patient and a little more thoughtful into working on a game. And that's a real challenge, right? With RPGs, especially with like, I know when we were working on Captain's Log and trying to streamline 2D20 into a different kind of rule set, was that like the younger generation of gamers, they don't want to read a 300-page book, right? They want to play the game. They want to get moving. They want a quick explanation of the rules, and then they want to go play. I see it all the time on Discord and on Facebook and on all the social media specifically for Star Trek Adventures, but also tangentially other Modiphius games and then other games out there in the RPG meta. Is like they'll maybe buy the core book, they'll maybe buy the quicks, or they'll maybe pick up the quick start, and almost immediately, just based on reading between the lines of their posts, they're like, okay, I got this game. I don't know how to play it. Can someone give me a short video? Can someone walk me through this? Can someone give me the 30-second, info bite that will help me understand this game and play it? And I read those comments. I'm like, well, shoot, I can't like there's too much to this system. I can't possibly distill it down to 30 seconds. I've tried to encourage people, like, just focus on the core mechanic, target number, 2d20, difficulty number, you're off and running, and then add the other mechanics to taste. So I don't know what my point here is, but I think gaming as a whole, specifically RPG, tabletop RPGs, really need to think about how are we presenting our games and our rule sets, and how are we not so much streamlining, but how are we making them easy to understand in really short bites, as opposed to like telling a kid, because I was 13 when I got into D&D, right? So I was young and impressionable, right there in middle school, brain wide open for sponging up everything, right? But now, back then we didn't have the level of this. You were talking about the level of distractions that we have now, right? Everybody's got a smartphone. Everybody's got to watch a billion things coming at them left and right, constant information overload. And to tell a kid, hey, you want to play Star Trek Adventures? Here's the 350-page core rule book. Go absorb that. One of you gets to be the game master, and your expectation is that you're going to have to know this game inside and out, because your players are going to be coming to you asking questions for the game.
Now you're making me think what we need to do is, like, the only thing I've seen that was really cool is, there's others, but I'm thinking of Catan and Exploding Kittens. If you go to YouTube and you have this cool little 3 to 5 minute video where these guys are really cool and they explain you the rules in 3 to 5 minutes, and it really works. And I show it every time before I introduce the game, and then we jump into it. Maybe Jim will have to put our brains together and create a 5-minute how to play Star Trek Adventures game, which I actually think is possible with the mechanics, with the basic mechanics.
We do have some of those out there, Sam Webb did a really good job of creating some very short videos on how to play Star Trek Adventures. This was 7 years ago, and they're still out there on the YouTube channel. And it's just a matter of pointing people to that. And certainly no disparagement on the younger generations, but I get the feeling sometimes that people don't know how to use a search engine, so they'll go to Discord and they'll just ask questions. And I love that. Please ask the questions when you've got them, but at the same time, as a young person working your way through school, working toward your career, like learn how to do just a teeny bit of research, right?
There are so very many things, Jim, I want to say in response in terms of development, and I'm just going to say one.
Yeah, go ahead.
That I don't think any of us should be dumbing down or simplifying or unnecessarily titrating anything.
Mm-hmm.
Kids today have the same capacities as they've always had.
Absolutely.
That said, though, I think you don't simplify content, you provide guidance. And I think that's one of the ways, again, not just on pandering, but that's one of the ways that Captain's Log stood out right away to the two of us. The flow charts, for example, in Captain's Log. And I think we've talked about this with you actually, but and I don't remember if it was like just writing, texting or whatever, but the flow charts are invaluable. Like if we had the flow charts back when we first picked up STA, right, the core rulebook, that would have been a rapid on-ramp. Because core rulebooks, I'm sorry, but with all due respect to everyone out there, I've yet to see an easy-to-read, easy-to-use core rulebook. STA probably gets as close to that or closer than anybody out there. Some of my favorite games, the core rulebooks are just a mess. We'll ignore the editing. They're just a mess in terms of the flow. That's where Captain's Log just really stands out, because everything moves. And then when you get to the crunchy parts, here's the flow chart so that you can see it and you can keep going back to it. I think things like that, right, that's your Twitch, that's your YouTube, that's your whatever, where kids and adults can follow it.
Yeah. So I want to make sure. First, I apologize profusely if I came across as saying that we need to simplify or dumb down
no
mechanics or the games, because that's absolutely not my intent. Like, my son is 7 years old and he is smarter than me, and like he picks stuff up like way faster than I'm ever going to be able to, and I'm thrilled to see it. But I think what I was trying to get at, though, is what you articulated much better than me, Jason, is that we need to rethink the presentation of the rules and how things are presented. And this really impacts game masters, because game masters are kind of expected to be teachers, right? And some of them are good teachers and some of them are not good teachers. But like, I've seen firsthand and secondhand, just by listening on social media, that like a bad game master will kill your game. Like if they run your game in a convention and they suck at it, people are going to walk away from that saying that game sucks because I had a horrible experience at the convention, and it may have been the game, but it may have been the game master. But then you get to a convention and like you have an amazing game master who's evocative and exciting and fun and brings cool props to the table, and you're like, oh, this is an amazing game, even though subconsciously they're thinking this is an amazing game master. Right. So there's that piece of it. So no, absolutely, we shouldn't be dumbing anything down or simplifying it. We should just be making better presentations. So that was one piece of it. And then the one thing I wanted to say, just in response to what you were saying, is that I've seen one game in Mumble years that I thought was really good at presenting the game and the rules. And I wish more companies would do this, but it was the West End Games Star Wars Revised and Expanded Edition core rulebook. It was the one that came out. It was full color in and out. And what they did is they had a set of iconic characters that they created for the game, right? So there's like your consistent soldier, and there's a Jedi, and there's like 6 or 7 iconic characters. And throughout the book, as I remember, I have to pull it off the shelf to remember for sure, but there were like little sidebars, little vignettes in the character's voice explaining elements of the rules as you went. Right. So like you were reading in the rules, and then you were seeing these little sidebars that kind of reinforced the mechanics. And I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. This is great, because now I'm getting it. I'm reading the technical side of things and kind of grokking the mechanics. And now I'm reading the narrative that's folded into that. And now it's making more sense, because I was getting it 2 different directions. And that really helped me developmentally, like, understand the game better than just reading the book and then hoping that I could find a game master who understood the rules better than me, who could then teach it to me. Right. So
I think the term, just I want to make a term that we use around my office about what we're trying to do here. It's not, we don't use the term dumbing down. We use the term make it more accessible. So what we got to do is make these games more accessible to a wider variety of people, and getting out of the Oxford didactic way that we think people are supposed to be learning, which isn't true. There's many different brain ways, ways to work. So I'd like to, and I think we're doing a step with Captain's Log. Video gives another option for accessibility. TikTok might also, if we get that creative.
Your kickstart, different mechanic. Your quick
Quick
start
start.
guide.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, haha. Your quick start guide. I think you guys did that. That I was amazed. I mean amazed at how easy it was to get into the game. Because right, I mean the 2D20, it's not simple, right? And with all the pieces around it, there's a lot going on, and until you see it, you don't see it. In the quick start guide, I read through it. I read through it as literature, like months and months and months before we actually tried playing it, and it was like, okay, I know they told me they're going to use this to teach me. It says that right up front. And as I'm reading it through, like doing some of the roles, I'm thinking to myself, they're actually teaching me how to do this. And I think like so the way that's oriented, that's designed, it's just wonderful. And then I think you know, if you can add a visual or two, like it just, but that, to your point, like that made it so accessible, and it felt like it felt like I was in an episode. It felt like I was actually learning how to play, and it didn't feel like it was simplified. Well, I just thought that was super slick.
You give those away on site, $0. Not only for Star Trek Adventures, but Dune has it. The other games have it. I've downloaded them. Green Ronin honestly does a good job with their quick starts as well. And I think those are, we've talked about this with Jim on our episode, points of entry, different points of entry to the game. Captain's Log is a point of entry. The Klingon core rulebook is a point of entry. The quick start guide is a point of entry. Heck, the Rules Digest is a point of entry. You've given, Star Trek Adventures has given multiple, ingress points to the game. And the quick start and the quick starts, I think, are, PDF form or 15 pages printed. I still like to print. However, maybe that could be done to be used with the younger generation. I just think it's a free way. They could play a whole game. They could download the free missions that you have out there. There's so many different ways that you could play. You could start playing. Not that I don't want you to sell books, but without even buying a book yet.
Totally true. Totally true. So much here. My thing is, if every one of us, and me and Jim talk about, if once a year we just get one or two people to play and create game masters of them, then it'll propagate. And I think it's been going pretty well, Jim. It seems like on social media that people are actually picking up the reins.
I see a few veteran Star Trek game masters out there who are actually intentionally running beginner games for people, either at conventions or online, and I appreciate them so much because they're literally growing the game like person by person. And I think most games these days, that's what you've got to do. I think the behemoth in the house is Wizards of the Coast. No one's going to touch them. They are an industry unto themselves. And then there's everybody else, right? Except maybe Paizo. I think Paizo is somewhere in the mid range there because they're so entrenched. But yeah, I mean, you gotta, like any game. I mean, I feel like Star Trek Adventures has actually started to gain some headway here within the last maybe year and a half to 2 years. And it's been 7 years of work, right, getting to this point. And it's not just me, and it's not just Modifius. It's the fans have taken this on and are working with each other. And I think that's a sign of a healthy game. Anytime you got a fan base that's motivated to support themselves is a win, right? Absolute win. And I think
I was telling you today, my blog's never done better. It's exploded. The continuing mission. I look at how many people come to it and interact on it. It's the past 6 months has been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we just gotta keep going with that. And like you were saying, I pushed really hard to get those flow charts into Captain's Log, and I badgered Michael constantly saying, look, we've got to find a way. Like I mean, absolutely, we're going to streamline 2D20, but in addition to streamlining 2D20, let's get flowchart, figure out a way. And I mean, I know it was a heavy lift for you, Michael, but I was working on 4 other things. I couldn't do it all.
No, I had Josh Allen. Josh Allen gets full cred for those flowcharts.
He did an amazing job. And I was like, we've got to find a way to present this text textually, of course, but also visually. We've got to find a way to make it happen. And I think we did okay. I think I wish I'd had another 6 months, right, to do another beauty pass on it. And going back to something you all talked about at the very beginning of tonight's show, is where you were saying it would be cool if some of the other lines at Modiphius were to do a solo RPG like Dune or Act on Cthulhu or something. And I've told the other project managers, like, look, we've got Captain's Log, use this as the baseline. But I said, if you're going to do a solo RPG, take what we did and make it better. Like this was like the embryonic first draft of a solo RPG in the 2D20 sphere. I want to see what they can do with it. I want to see them evolve it, right? I don't know if that's going to happen. It's not in my purview. I just hope they do. We'll see though, because like I would love to play Dune. I just don't have anybody in my world that gives anything about Dune. I guess Michael, maybe you do. Of course, you got the super fancy book, so I think I'd be constantly jealous of your fancy book.
Well, I read through the rule book because it's easier once you pick. This is a good thing. Once you know one 2D20 game, it's pretty easy to pick up any of the other things. But I have to admit that the design on the houses and the monetary basis of Dune, I am dying to play because it's such a slow. It's like not even better than Risk. I'm trying. It slow bakes the story, which is I'm dying to play Dune actually.
Right, because that's Dune, right? A feint within a feint within a feint, right? I mean, that's the thing.
It's like kind of like Twilight Imperium, the board game. It's kind of another type of slow burn type of game. And I'm it's one of those games I would like to try before the end of the year. I don't know if I'll have a vehicle.
I think I'm going with my wife. She likes Dune. So we're going away for 3 days to Yosemite, like a cabin to relax. And I'm bringing it with us. And I just think it's like, hey, let's build a house just for funsies.
Awesome.
I would love to play an RPG version of Diplomacy. If any of you have played Diplomacy, like the slow burn, the negotiation, the alliances, and then at the absolutely right time you do the backstab, and then you got the end game and you're winning. And oh man, that is such a stressful game, but it is so much fun when it works. I mean, when you're on the wrong end of it, it really sucks, right? But when you spend hours, I mean, in some cases weeks, right? Like there was a time when I was playing Diplomacy on played by email. Right. This is back in the early stages of the internet. And like, I mean, in the back dig, I know there were gamers who would actually like literally mail their moves to the central person who was playing it. Right. But then, of course, the internet came and made it a little bit easier. But that is a very tense game. And I would love to find an RPG version of that. I think Amber might be the only one that I've really played that had that kind of level of PvP, but also working together elements. And of course Amber was diceless, which was kind of a cool approach to role playing. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Diplomacy, I had to quit playing it because I would get too wired and fired up over it, and I realized that it was going to probably kill me from a blood pressure issue. But that is it is a phenomenal game, and like you said, a slow burn.
Yeah.
Man. Okay. Whew. Okay. I see, I've never again had the pleasure to be with Brad, Jason, and Jim at the same time on a podcast, but no joke, this could easily go 4 hours. So we got to get to the place though, which I want to talk is always promoting our guests who come on. Tell us about this book that's out there now.
Jason, you got to talk about the book.
Jason. That's really so here. It's like leadership in Star Trek. Lessons from the Captain's Chair. One of my other good friends, Aaron, we both teach leadership, and we all get it. You can only do what you're doing and try to do it well for so long before you start to recognize, and here are the common problems, right? And okay, so the short version is we tried to get this out into the world, some of these ideas in a couple different venues. We actually tried to get this published in an academic journal, and there just weren't really good fits. And then kind of blew our mind. We got a couple pieces on StarTrek.com. And it was like, when that started happening, it was like, yeah, there's clearly, we know we want to write this. We know what we want to write. There's clearly an audience. If they're willing to burn some space on that, and then people get it. There's an interest. And so we were kind of emboldened, and we got to a point, and I said to Aaron, who again, great guy, I said to Aaron, I'm like, I'm doing this. I am internally compelled to do this. There are just things if you've ever read a leadership book, the first thing you've probably discovered is it probably sucks. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some good ones out there, but they are exceptions to the rule. And one of the things that really raises my hackles is when, and this is true in a lot of fields, there's so little research cited behind, like, hey, do these things for leadership because this is the way the world works. That's great. What does the research say? And very few people could answer that. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to write a scientifically informed book on leadership. And I want to do it through Star Trek because why wouldn't we? We're just going to have fun. And I'm just going to trust that this sucker is going to get published. And so much, well, I was going to say to our amazement, but no, because I really thought it would happen. It would just be a matter of time, and we weren't in a hurry. So we got this wonderful academic publisher, McFarland, and they got it right away. And our editor, Layla Milholland, she just got it right away. And so the book is hopefully fun to read. It's targeted for both students and professionals, and it's basically 40 plus case studies across the grand captains of Star Trek, looking at all the different things that might come up in leadership, good, bad, and ugly, and all backed up by the research. And sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's a little, depends what's there. Each chapter starts with a vignette. That's the closest I've ever gone to writing fiction, and it was a grotesque amount of fun. And so no, I really appreciate you letting me just chill it for a sec.
I love it.
Who wrote the foreword, Jason? Jason, who wrote
this is so Aaron Walke, the EP from one of the EPs from Prodigy, who's just the nicest guy.
Wow.
And I don't know him personally, but in our interactions, we reached out through a contact, and like right away he was like, yeah, I'll write it. And he wrote us just a lovely foreword, because you look at things like Prodigy and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's like, that makes sense. This is the kind of person we want writing, and we had nothing to lose, so we reached out. He's like, yep, I'm a little busy, could have waited a couple of months. It's like, it can wait as long as you want. And he got us this lovely forward, and it was a pure joy. And now, this is my first book, and so now it's learning all the cool weird stuff behind that, like you guys deal with all the time, right? The production stuff and the publication stuff, and now the marketing stuff, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I'll say, midway through writing this book, it started to occur to us, especially to me, okay, this is the first step, but one of the things we encountered when we wrote this is being humble kind of is implicit in every chapter. Like, what are the Trek captains good at? And Archer, not so much. But so we call him an adolescent explorer, and we talk about, here's what we can still learn about it. And so we're about 40% now into the second book, and our working title for that is Humble Leadership.
Nice.
And we're focusing specifically on Pike as a captain through the lens of Strange New Worlds. And that's, if you want a deep dive that's just scientifically rigorous and also teaches you the meditative skills to be a whole humble leader, that's our follow-up. But I would highly recommend it, because
I love it, Jim. Hold it up one more time for those who are. The whole title.
Leadership in Star Trek: Lessons from the Captain's Chair. They just nailed the cover. McFarland has just been an absolute pleasure to work with them. We're so lucky. So thank you guys. That's really sweet. I appreciate it. This is actually I'm putting this, like, this is actually Brad's copy that I'm waiting to send him. So
I said I wanted it signed by both authors.
Yeah.
So, and I was going to buy one and ship it up there, but he said, no, I got a copy.
No. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Jim, what were you going to say? Because then I know I want to follow up with.
Well, I was just going to get down into the weeds and just be really practical about the business of publishing, and say that I'm going to try to figure out a way to start a letter writing campaign. Like, once I get my copy, I'm going to devour it and highlight the hell out of it. But I'm going to try to get fans to write some sort of letter campaign to your publisher to say, please, for the love of God, make an ebook of this thing. It's not hard to do.
It's the ebook is coming.
Oh, it is. Good. Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
The ebook. Oh, yeah. We asked about that. They're academic. They're not one of the big ones, and so everything's just in queue. Yeah. So this published officially on 8/14. It became available through pretty much any outlet. Actually, like approximately today, Amazon's had it for better than a week. And we were told the ebook takes 2 to 3 weeks because they've got to do it. So the ebook is absolutely coming.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Okay, well,
Yeah.
good.
So
So
what-
that's fantastic. And the last thing I was going to say is unsolicited, suggestion, because like we do this all the time anyway when we're talking on your show, is I think it would be fantastic to take all this leadership and if you, not just from the captain perspective, but from like a department head perspective, like tell the stories of Geordi and Data and Worf as leaders in their little queue, with a higher leader above. Of course, you got Riker and Picard above them, but it would be fascinating because, like, I know with leadership, especially at my job, there's so many middle managers, right? And a lot of those middle managers could really use some leadership skills and some leadership development.
Okay, so you're totally on the wavelength of this book, because we wrote it so that it was really intentionally accessible for anyone who's interested in leadership and or Star Trek. But our specific audiences in mind were like grad students in leadership or mid-level people in corporate who had to do professional development. And then one more thing I'll say is, I wrote this series of vignettes. It starts every chapter, and over the course of the book, it tells a story through your eyes as the reader of someone who's presumably about in mid-level leadership, and what that's like and what you need and what's there to be learned. So yeah, I'm 100% with you, and I might steal your idea for the second one. But
well, here I'm feeling some synergy here, because me and Jim have dreamt about, because both of us do leadership training. I do executive leadership training. I do conflict resolution. I travel around doing that. And I dream about one day, and me and Jim have talked about actually teaching them how to play RPG for like the session to confront these issues and have them in their tables, do scenarios, role play, roll the dice just to get the risk factor in there.
Aaron, my friend and co-author, he's an expert in conflict resolution. Wow. So that was, totally cool. There. It would be awesome.
Jason, that lost episode we have, what was the title of that episode?
It was conflict resolution in Star Wars. Yeah. We'll have them back. Yeah, my bad. Yeah.
I am, as an end user, I'm very excited to get my copy, because I've lived in that middle management realm.
When I would pitch stuff to you, I'm like, okay, test this out. Tell me if we're on the wrong track here.
Yeah, don't overstate. But
it's true.
I am a consumer. I'm very lucky that I know both of them, who have written this, because I know this, Jim. You both know this better than I do, probably. There's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of compassion, and there's just a lack of just sheer
a lack of yes.
There's just and I'm in the middle of a job search, and I have purposely limited my scope because I just have to find a way to not deal with that, because how toxic the environment can be.
Yeah, I want to plug one thing too. I'm actually putting in I'll try to remember to put it in the blog post when I put this up. But there was an article I did, and I don't know if you've heard of Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley. She's actually a huge Star Trek fan, but she wrote she worked for the U.S. State Department, and she wrote 2 papers, white papers, one diplomacy in Star Trek and the other one the representation of disability in Star Trek. And I'm loving when people are making the connection to this genre of it's a better future, a better humanity. So I just put that in. I'll refer people, if you type in the word, go to Continuing Missions and type in the word diplomacy, you'll see those 2 white papers from Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley. So it's kind of remind me of the work you're doing, Jason.
That's cool.
Is bringing leadership and Star Trek together.
Yeah, thanks. I suspect this will show up in the next one. That's awesome.
By the way, I did order the Against the Gods book. Jason always laughs because I'll tend to order something during an episode.
I do it with Jim too.
It's a running joke of how far in will we get to an interview, and I know when Brad's looking away for more than about 30 to 40 seconds that he is so entering credit card information.
I already popped. Mine's automatic. I have my automatic.
Mine too. Yeah.
I popped it up. I really want that ebook though, because I read in the Kindle in the pool while I have my Kindle that's waterproof.
Yeah.
So I hit the suntan and get the reading on at the same time. So I want your
I ordered the ebook for this, because I'll read on mine.
Where's the ebook? I didn't see an ebook option.
Wait,
There's a Kindle option for Against the Gods, not for Jason's book. For Against the Gods. Yeah.
Right. For Against the Gods there is, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think we did it. We did an episode a few weeks ago with Chris McCarver and Jacob Ross and somebody else, and we just ended up talking about writing and the writing life and Captain's Log and like how it teaches writing, and like we were all literally pulling books off our shelves and we are like, oh yeah,
so
Save the
funny.
Cat, this, that, and the other thing, Understanding Comics.
I bought this one
all of
right
us
on
were
that
like,
same
oh,
show.
See?
And there was a moment where it got really kind of quiet, and we were, because we were all on our other screen ordering from Amazon, and now we've got all these books coming in. And
I
it's
bought
like,
3 books during that episode. I
Oh my
remember.
god! Kind of hashtag normalize capitalism.
Vindication.
Yeah,
Vindication.
seriously. I'm gonna
Hashtag-
have to. But
hashtag
but to
capitalization.
flip this around for a sec, I will say one of the things that's been clear in the past like half dozen episodes of your podcast of this one is it seems you guys are evolving too in what you're doing, especially courtesy of Captain's Log. Like your vibe is changing too. I think the interviews, the discussions, the banter, like you guys are getting deep and you're having fun. And it's not just plugging away at the game, which is great because it's such a resource, right? Like I'm blocking on which one it was. I was just glued to one of your. It was one of the early Captain's Logs episodes. I don't remember which one it was. It was explaining something that I was struggling with as we were getting Trek Talks going, and it was like I paused it 2 or 3 times so I could write little bits. It's like this was exactly what I was looking for, and you guys do that. You've always done that, but like yeah, when you're pulling books off of shelves and stuff like that, I mean that's kind of a cool evolution too because of where you guys are. Who knows where you're going to go? That's neat.
yeah,
What was the book, Jim, you recommended to us about DS9? I have it on my shelf.
Oh yeah, it's,
That was phenomenal.
It's the making of Deep Space Nine by
Yes.
Judy and Garfield Reed Stevens. Hang on a second, I got it here. It's literally right behind me. It's a big honking tome, the Deep Space Nine companion. Oh no, that's not it. No.
Oh no. Yeah, you're
this was
almost
a
there.
different.
It
Yeah.
was
I
the
also
making-
yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
It's
It's-
well
it's-
worth
Judy
reading.
Garfield is
Yes.
so good. And you pair this up with Save the Cat or Story by Robert McKee, you're gold.
Or this one.
Which one's
Manuscript
that?
Makeover.
That manuscript makeover, Elizabeth Lyon. It's up there with Hack the Cat. I read it for screenplay, but
Save
also
the Cat.
how Save the Cat. I always call it.
The cat. It's a weird looking cat.
No cat hacking here.
Good
No
Lord,
cat-
you're going to
no
get
cats
PETA
were-
involved here now.
Yeah.
There's a reason why, but I'm going to ignore why I keep calling it that. But yeah, this was another one that actually was key to me with Captain's Log about how to tell a
Oh
story.
wow.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
this was the backbone of that, in addition to like some of the other books that we've been talking about.
Yeah, Jason, I don't think it was intentional that our focus has shifted a little bit, but knowing Michael as a lifelong educator and corporate trainer and also a writer, and me being a writer and also doing a lot of training and development at work, I almost wonder if Captain's Log was kind of unintentionally our conduit to start teaching people how to write and how to write Star Trek specifically. And I think it might also be an element of me and probably Michael as well, where we love this franchise so much and we want to make it accessible and easy for other people to get into it. And one of the easiest ways to get into it is to write fanfic. And there's no shame. There's nothing wrong with fanfic, because I started writing fanfic when I was 14, 15, whatever. And of course, that's how I got my career started, right? Is writing the short stories for Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, the writing contest. And I mean, that contest ran for 10, 11 years. And there was 20 writers per book. So you figure that's, 200 plus stories and writers that got started thanks to Star Trek and Strange New Worlds.
Right.
The contest, not the series the series came later. But I think this is just an opportunity. I think over the last few weeks, as I've seen the reaction to the book, and as I thought about all the stuff that we put into the book, I think this was, and Michael, I don't know how you feel, but I think this was me subconsciously wanting to teach people to unlock their creativity, to be writers, to be more confident writing, and to just let go and have fun and do something cool with this amazing franchise. And if I could help develop this book and give them this tool and say, here's this tool, please go do something cool with it, and then share what you're doing so that I can see it. That was my hope, I think. And I think just over time, I think our episodes have gotten more into that zone of like, we are writers and we are storytellers.
Yeah.
And you are a writer and a storyteller, and we know it's within you. It's within your brain. You just maybe haven't been encouraged to unlock it. And I think that's something that Michael and I have talked a lot about lately, is how the arts in America are just not encouraged. Like no one's to do music or to do writing or anything, and we want to change that.
Well, people are, and we know that the overall trend is to silence voices when it comes to power. And when you give someone a voice, or you're even able to communicate your own voice well, you actually get very powerful. I know when I write these books, Jim's heard me say it before. I did it with Captain's Log, Game Master's Guide, Player's Guide. I'm writing it for my 13-year-old niece. She's going on 15. But when I wrote it initially, I wrote it, how can I get my 13-year-old niece into this? And my nephew Maddie, who posts now on Continuing Mission sometimes, he's 16 years old now. And for the reason that Jim was saying is, it's like when you pass somebody a karaoke mic the first time and then you see they have confidence, even if they didn't sing well, they're like, my God, but that did something dopamine to me and I want to do it again. Or improv acting, once you get up there, what that does for the mind and for the voice and expressing, and especially in the business environment, learning how to express your voice and put on different masks that you need to in order to navigate the complex structure of corporate America. I feel that when we're putting in this, I'm trying to empower people. I'm not just trying to have fun, but I do believe that work can be fun. You can play at work and get stuff done, right?
Absolutely.
So
Jim has been letting us, not just me, but everybody just pour the best into that. And my dream, which we've already started to see happen, which has thrilled me, is that people are taking this book and matching it with other books outside of the Star Trek franchise, and they're building their own universes. And to me, it's like, thank you. No limits. Just go for it. Stop judging yourself. Somebody said the other day, I'm not going to play this because I see people are doing such cool stuff. And I personally reached out to them. I said, don't do that to yourself. Don't do that. I said, why would you, if you want to play the guitar, just because you can't play it the first time you pick it up, you're going to give up? Don't jump into it. And so I think these are kind of the RPG is literature values we're trying to push out there.
I would fight tooth and nail anyone who says that they aren't a writer and they don't, and they shouldn't play it, because you know what? I never thought I was. And I think the first thing I looked at when I saw that is, I never felt my creativity was channeled through music. I never felt like it was channeled through the word.
And that's storytelling, though. That's the same thing. It's still storytelling.
But the book, and when I read through it, and I told Jason the other day, as I'm reading through it, I told you today, I'm reading through it for the second time, as a book, because even I, who didn't think they had a creative pen in them, can do it. And
I believe all humans are storytellers. I mentor youth, BIPOC youth coming up through into corporate America who thought they didn't have the chance. And one of the classes I teach them every year when I workshop them is know your story. Everyone has a story. And they end up crying or laughing because like, oh my God, I do have a good story, even though I'm 16, 17, 18 years old. Yeah. And so I think, honestly, everybody out there, you all have stories to tell. Every single one of you has a story to tell. And hopefully this is just one tool, one means that you'll learn to, tell your story.
Yeah. I mean, plus what a great franchise to just tell stories in, right?
Oh, yeah.
Anything's possible. Everybody's accepted for who they are. And you just come as you are. You'll fit right into the Star Trek family and right into the Star Trek universe. And you can tell literally any genre of story that you want, and somehow it will fit. Like if you watch 56 years worth of episodes, there's mysteries, there's murders, there's horror stories, there's romance, there's
musicals,
cartoon
crossovers.
Yeah, there's crossovers, there's battle, there's like hardcore war drama, there's PTSD. I mean, like any story that you can imagine, any genre off the shelf, you can find a way to bend it into Star Trek and make it work. And and it's safe, right? It's safe. Like no one's going to tell you not to do it. I mean, so there's certainly going to be people that tell you why are you doing it, but you can ignore them because it's safe.
And those fundamental principles that you guys have written about in Captain's Log and the GM guide and the player's guide, right? Of this is Trek, right? No matter what they do in Trek, those principles are always present, right? The diversity, the dignity, the knowledge, like no matter what, it always ends up back of, and we're going to be better people.
Yeah. I tell you, Jason, I can't wait for your book to come out and to hit the mainstream, so that Star Trek gamers can read your book and then apply that to Captain's Log into the stories that they're telling, just to see how it seeps in, right? Like, the conceit of Captain's Log is that you're playing a captain, and you don't have to, but you could be. And then captains have a certain feel in Star Trek, like I'm sure you've put in your book. But like even departments, maybe you want to play the chief medical officer, you want to play the chief engineer or something. All those principles that are in your book, I can't wait to find somebody who's taking your book and pairing it up with Captain's Log, and then going forth and doing something amazing. In fact, I challenge somebody, like one of our listeners, one of our readers, go get Jason's book and read it, and then apply some like find one nugget of gold out of that book, and then apply it to a Captain's Log story that you're telling, and then tell us about it. Like, share it.
Let us all know.
And that's what's amazing though about this genre. Lower Decks was my opportunity to take everything I know about HR policy and put it into but literally it was I took everything totally I knew about HR, and those are the things about how to work your way up in for a promotion. Jim was laughing because he knew this. He knows I have an HR background, and he was just like, "This is totally reads like an HR manual." Like, perfect. Then I did my job.
It was like the only RPG book I've ever seen where we talked about career pathing.
Jason and I are always, I mean, there isn't a conversation where we aren't acerbic with each other in some way, shape, or form, because we love each other and we can do that. I know, at least it's one way. But the one thing where we've never joked, there are very few areas where we never joked. And the one area was when he was, I know it's going to be hard for you to remember, but it was when it was about this book, because I think the idea of leadership, we've had very serious conversations about this, and I am excited to read it because it's, like I said before, something is missing in leadership. I did my MBA and did research. My MBA research was on Adelphia, Enron, and Tycho, where there was an absolute lack of, any sort of ethical rudder. And we saw what happened, and we're set to see it happen again.
Yeah. We've been trying to figure out a way to actually bring this to Dice and Mind, and we just haven't figured that out yet. But now I'm thinking maybe we're going to end up picking Michael's brain later this week when you're on with us. But we've been trying to figure out, okay, who's out there who could speak to this? Like, what you talk about ethical business all the time, Brad, and how could we do that in that somehow RPG adjacent to stay with the theme? Because we've been talking, we just haven't figured it out yet. We're still looking. Yeah.
Oh, I have a lot of ideas about that. I've
I've
gamified the subject at my work. I run gamification on these subjects, and we play through them. So interesting to
sucks for the people who die after they find the gold, but
hey, we project 20% turnover every 3 years anyway, so it's all part of that risk assessment.
It's like the Enron rank and yank. Everyone ranks each other, and the bottom 10% were all just automatically wiped and fired.
No, so, ours is economic. I'm in the Bay Area, so we can blame it on economic factors. We figure people are going to be just pushed out, and we can't control those factors. So
it's true.
That's my marketing spiel.
Yeah,
looks like we have at least one topic to talk about when Michael joins us. Not that we would have any trouble anyway, but I
expect we'll have more.
Yeah,
man. And of course, Jim will be coming back eventually for a 6. We just wanted to give you some breathing room.
Well, Jim has like 50 other topics to talk about with all the releases coming out, but I'm sure he'll.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, anytime. Know that.
We'll sign an NDA any day you want.
I think we've got so much stuff we can talk about now that's Star Trek adjacent. I think we could probably finally do an episode that's not involving a shill for a new product. I think.
But we're totally okay with the shilling stuff too.
Oh yeah, of course. I don't mind it, but I just love talking to you guys, and
right back at you.
The practicalities of it is it's not as freaking as we want it to be, but I am grateful every time you keep inviting me back. It's like, okay, I'll find something. We'll talk more Star Trek, more gaming, more stuff. Yeah,
you did an episode with us about you gave us in effect a class on writing.
That was
I wanted
cool.
to go back.
Yeah.
I remember coming out of that and thinking to myself,
Yep.
I could not have. I was trying to find it while I was looking, but I can't. But just after we talked about that episode, just going through this writing, you kind of just alluded to it a little bit with Strange New Worlds when you were writing. Just that whole topic, it really wasn't even Trek focused. It was writing focused.
Episode 49, May
you.
9th of last year.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow, was it last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
May 9th of last year.
That wasn't the most recent. That was just the one.
Yeah.
Our first Star Trek Adventures episode where we talk about it was literally our 5th episode. And we spent 3 episodes on it, 5, 6, and 7. And then finally, I don't know where it was, Jim, you joined us. I think I want to say it was in the mid-30s or something like that.
Yeah, that last time when we had told you, we knew enough. We knew you well enough. I had said to Brad, I'm like, okay, we know we're gonna go long. Let's just go all the way, and then we'll pull at least a couple episodes out of it.
Well, to that point, you've just stretched our shows till February 2nd. Now we have
sorry.
shows recorded till February. No,
Sorry.
I don't mind. No, but I'm splitting this one because now we're good till February 2nd. I can take a vacation. I'm good.
Out of here.
We may have to try to push Michael when he joins us, Jace, to make it a double episode too. We'll see.
You'll find a way.
We'll find a way.
Michael talks as much as I do.
Not as much as Jason.
I think we all do really good, but it's nice. It's a shared. It's like being around the table. I picture, drinking some beverages. Yeah. I picture the smoky room, yellow lighting, fireplace, and we just get, we're the modern scholars. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. All right. Well, so we've been at this for a little over 2 hours now, and I think,
man,
we've probably
it doesn't feel like
kept you much longer than not that I didn't intend to keep you a long time, but I'm grateful that you spent so much time with us, and we'll absolutely have you back on the show sometime here real soon,
guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. You've been we were very honored to have you for you to ask us. So thank you so much.
And we're grateful you accepted.
Oh yeah, anytime. This is so much fun, and Michael, so nice to finally meet you.
Exactly. Yes. No, this is great. I have a feeling that after having this conversation with the two of you and Jim, that I'm like, I'm going to really pull out some deep subjects for our next ones.
Sweet.
Yeah. So as tradition on our show, we always end the show with gratitude, where we just offer our thanks to whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're grateful for. And Michael usually kicks us off, and then we go to our guests, and then I wrap it up, and then we sign off. So Michael, what are you grateful for that you would like to share?
Sure. Well, definitely to Dyson Mind, I'm going to talk today about the podcasts or the streamers and the people who are putting it out there and making the game more accessible in different formats to different people. So definitely Brad Brown, Jason Kaufman for Dyson Mind. People, again, pick them up on your podcast services, type in Dyson Mind or either their first name, Brad or Jason, they'll come up. I also want to thank Really Dicey. I know that they're a big supporter of RPGs and talking about what's going on out there. Manny from Really Dicey. I even think about Geek Gamers. They actually did one of the books for solo RPG for Modiphius. But again, they go ahead and put some helpful videos out there on YouTube, along with Al Spader, who's been working in conjunction with Wanderers Haven Publications, showing people live play about how to do the game. So I could go on and on and on, because literally in the past 2 weeks, it seems like every day there's a new person showing something about the games. But I just got to give a shout out again to this crowd of creators who are making RPG more accessible, making people understand why it's important to have a creative outlet that's safe and have happy endings with the creative outlet. Not everything bloody. Every time we turn on the news, we see a shooting or some act of violence, and we've got to get in our homes and we got to be peaceful, and we've got to invite people to our peace. And I think that everybody contributing in this space is doing that. So thank you to everybody who does that.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Michael. Brad, what are you grateful for?
Honestly, I said this early on, the whole community, and we were really introduced to that community through Twitter. Honestly, it was a great vehicle for us, and having to meet you both, having the opportunity to speak with you both, having the opportunity to speak to all the people that we've had on the show. We're in a, Jason and I don't talk politics, but I think we can all agree it's a really tough time out there in many, many, many ways. And I think that this arena, if you watch people talk out there, 99% of them are beacons of light. in a very, very dark world that we have now. So I know it's very broad, but I could go down the list of all the people who follow us, people we follow. Just the, I'll be honest with you, like I said, I'm going through a job search. I'm being very careful with what I do, but my time spent with the STA stuff or with the 3D6 stuff, that actually helps me keep a rudder in a very difficult time. So thank you all, and thank you all in the community, anyone who listens. Keep doing what you're doing, because there's going to be people out there that are going to make us, they're trying to feed the dark, and you all are feeding the light.
Powerful stuff, Brad. Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, really well said, Brad. I'll piggyback off of that. Maybe three quick things. First, thanks to both of you very much for having us on. This is really lovely, a lot of fun. And second, because this podcast, Continuing Conversations, is so much of a bigger footprint than we have, vicariously through you guys being on here. Just to piggyback off of what you said, Brad. Seriously, thank you to every individual who has spent time with us on Dice in Mind. We always thank you, and we really mean it, but more people we want to know. We want them to know, like, we really appreciate it. It's such a neat, supportive, healthy, positive, forward community. And third, last but maybe not least, man, to the people, this is really kitschy, but to the people who are writing and directing Star Trek, right? I don't care what people say, we are still in a golden age of Star Trek. And what we see on TV, do we still say that? What we see on TV now with the current and recent Trek shows, Strange New Worlds and Picard and Prodigy and Lower Decks and Discovery, really curious about the last season. This is an antidote to bigotry, and it's an antidote to bigotry, and they're literally teaching us and showing us how to do it in trying times. How do you write that stuff? It's amazing. So I just, thank you to them. Star Trek has always been a guiding light in my life, but I think society now needs it even more than it did in the 60s, and they are delivering and then some.
Well said. Jim, take us out.
Wow, you all are. I'm gonna just end up echoing everything you all just said, because I've talked about it at length on our show, and also I think we've touched on it a couple of times on Dice in Mind, where 5, 6, 7 years ago the world was pretty dark, and it got really dark for me for a long time. And the one thing, other than my family, the one thing I had to focus on was Star Trek and Star Trek Adventures, and it was my beacon, it was my light through all that darkness. And the working on this game gave me the ability to reach out to so many people within the family, the extended Star Trek family, whether it's fans, writers, actors, directors, production people, etc., like that whole community. And they're so amazing, this collective community. I think we talked about it during this show, how amazing they are to talk to and work with, and how they're all on the kind of like the same vibe and wavelength of progressiveness and positivity, and just working together, and reaching down and lifting up as opposed to pushing down and pushing away. And I thank everybody for that kind of stuff, like that. All the guests we've had on the show, I'm grateful for. All the people that have invited me to podcasts or to interviews or whatever, that's just amazing. I'm just humbled every day that people even bother to reach out. But it's just an amazing community, not just Star Trek Adventures, but like Star Trek in general as a whole. And so I'm grateful for all of that, and I'm grateful for Brad and Jason, for you doing your show for 100 episodes now, with more to come, and everybody like you who are also doing their shows and are either at your level or below or above, like wherever you are. I would say just keep doing your show, even if you think you've only got like 30 subscribers or like 100 views, or whatever the numbers are. Who cares what the numbers are? There are people watching, and people are being moved by what you're doing, and they care, and they're coming back, and you're making a difference. So keep doing what you're doing, keep being passionate about what you're passionate about, and keep sharing that passion, because it's people are seeing it, people are noticing it, and I want to see more of it, because I'm one of your biggest fans, right? Not just you guys, but just in general. Keep doing it and keep sharing the love, and we'll keep working collectively to do our best to make our little pieces of the world's, a little bit better, maybe, and we'll see where that goes. So
there's a lot of healthy content out there. The other day, my wife's like, "Isn't this the same one you listened to the other day?" I went, "Amazingly not. There's just a lot of stuff going on." So keep it up. Every time she gets in the car, I'm listening to a different podcast about something Star Trek.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we want more of it. IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe, be well, and we'll talk to you all again real soon.